So your ensemble, your duet is considered called Fay Glassman, and you're performing here at the IRT Theater in the Archive Building in New York City, and you've just performed for several days your show. Mm-hmm. And if you could just talk about your training, and then after that talk about your methodology for your work, including your charting of the movement that you do in the show, and a little bit about sort of the content of the show.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So our backgrounds are a little bit different. My background is in dance and some theater and music, and I don't know what you did before.
Well, it's not a strict training, but some workshop stint with Claude Kipnis early on, which was an interest in mime that developed. And then a group of his students, several, we got together and we started doing shows together, and that became professional ensemble for 15 years, where we started as mime and then shifted into what could generally be called experimental theater or political theater or experimental political theater or theater, and with an emphasis on movement. And then also some kabuki theater with Shozo Sato, who conducted a project of bringing students in the United States into familiarity with Japanese traditional arts, including kabuki. So we formed a kabuki company of students at the University of Illinois, which is where we started working together. Also, I was long time involved in an experimental music composition seminar. Actually, it was an experimental composition seminar, which could be applied to music or any other domain or medium where composition is called for. And that was over a period of about 30 years with Herbert Brunn in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And those were training periods of a sort.
And then I think that our training for the work that we're currently doing really comes out of working together for the past 20 years. So that the movement that we're doing now, the material that we're doing, is rooted in dance and music and those kinds of things. But the techniques that we've developed have been developed in order to be able to do the work, which has not yet been done. So is that helpful? Good?
Yeah, we kind of go backwards. The training doesn't explain what we do, right, but what we want to do explains the techniques that we develop and teach ourselves and learn. So it's kind of backwards. The ideas precede the training. We discover what kind of training we need to do. Training is not the right word. But we make these techniques. We invent techniques. That would be the right term. And we invent techniques in order to manifest particular ideas that start in the abstract, and the ideas then are overlaid onto natural, normal-looking behavior, whatever those terms might mean, in order to crack them open in some way and say, as a premise, what if people were capable of a kind of behavior that we so far are not familiar with? How can we defamiliarize natural-looking human interaction, natural behavior, and make it seem strange, and make it actually be strange so that we can learn something from it, and hopefully what we can learn from that new kind of behavior is new ways of manifesting social life, social change, political change, artistic change, but change on the level of ordinary behavior, not change as could come about through extraordinary or fantastic behavior, but looking into the ordinary as being the shell of the medium that we're investigating, and within that constraint of the normal, what can be extraordinary within it if we contort it in some way.
And so if people see the show, which closes tonight. Too late. Their description would probably be, oh, it was really, wonderful, and then they would describe something very ordinary that they saw, and two people having coffee together. And the reason that the description would sound so ordinary is because they don't yet have words for the thing that's extraordinary about it, and that's the technique. And one of the things that we think about is we make a composition, and then how do we embody that composition? And that's the technical work that we do. Helpful?
Mm-hmm. And so some of those strange things that we do are, for example, go backwards, but not just incrementally, not leaping backwards, but actually developing the manner of moving backward continuously as in cinema, in a cinematic sense. So every movement would be resequenced in reverse. Every moment, not only jumping back 1 week earlier, or 5 minutes earlier. So that's one thing that we explore.
And it's so there the technique is figuring out not the position, but figuring out the pattern of acceleration in reverse, because that's what movement is. Right?
And it looks like it denies gravity, but still within the frame of natural task-oriented behavior. And therefore, since it looks like it denies gravity, it, funnily enough, looks like it reverses time. Because time, our sense of time, is somehow interconnected with our sense of living in gravity. So if you reverse one, you reverse the other, which is interesting. And
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good place to look at the intersection of, so where our backgrounds intersect with what we're doing. So in mime, or background, the illusions are all weight illusions, right? And so in reverse, that still comes into play, but it's taking the illusions of weight in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, yeah, go ahead.
And another one, I'll just name the main ones.
Okay.
Another one is something that we call pivoting, or pivots, or pivot montage. And it has the analogs in cinema with the cut, cinematic montage, and in music with enharmonic change, where there's a factor that is in common to something that comes before and something that comes after, so that there's a sudden seeming change into a new context without the perception of an intervening transition. Okay, and we do that as a gestural problem. We invent a technique gesturally that has that effect on an observer of suddenly shifting from one time and place frame to another time and place frame before they can perceive how the change was done, right? So it's sudden. It's a juxtaposition then of something that was just going on, but now it's gone, and something that's now all of a sudden happening, but I didn't see where it came from. And we can do that, and do that in any combination of patterns of one person against another person, or 8 people or 16 people if we have the opportunity. And so we construct these patterns built on the pivot technique that are compositional montage constructions, and we make pieces that way.
And in order for the pivot to work, and this is where it goes back to the ordinary, we can't make a pivot in dance that's already abstract, for instance. So there has to be a situation. It has to be situated in one specific time and place. So that's the ordinary behavior that we're doing. Otherwise, for the audience, there is no change. There isn't that same effect, that impossibility.
And what's the name of your show that you're doing here?
It's called Depth of a Moment in 4 parts.
The third part is a scherzo, which was pointed out to us.
All right, great.
Yeah, it's like music concert in the sense that there are 4 works or movements that are interrelated, but they're also compositionally distinct. And that's how we do a program. It's not a play or a narrative or a story or the lives of particular characters.
Another thing that we do is we call rhythmic filtering. So the first piece that you saw uses that. So there's a rhythm that's imposed on ordinary behavior, and once that rhythm is imposed, that rhythm creates a frame. So it's analogous to creating a frame. So then once that external frame is there, then you can start to see all these ordinary rhythms that go on that otherwise we would just overlook in some way.
There are 2 other kinds of things that we do that are in progress and in future pieces will be made visible. We lump under a term counterintuitive behavior, which might not be the best term, but that's what we're using. And we have means of constructing counterintuitive behavior different from the things that we mentioned so far that have to do with being able to separate in one body and what one performer does, separate what the person seems to be visibly saying from what they are actually audibly articulating in sound. Okay, so that's one way of cutting a person, in a sense, making a fault line through the integrity of a person's presence as a performance problem, live performance problem. And the other has to do with uncanny, extremely dense coordinations of tiny movements from one person to another. So it's on the level of entrainment, which goes on all the time between speakers and listeners. This would be pulling that out into the forefront and making a compositional playground out of these tiny, usually subconsciously, only subconsciously perceived movement coordinations.
Thank you very much.